Welcome to Beyond the Valley, a CNBC tech podcast with Arjun Kharpal and Tom Chitty.
Beyond the Valley.
One ring to rule them all is what Samsung are hoping with the launch of their Galaxy Ring, a wearable device that's able to track various health metrics such as heart rate and sleep. The South Korean tech giant is looking to integrate its smartphones and wearables and offer health tracking features to rival Apple's push into the space. Along with Meta's Ray-Ban smart glasses, battery-powered contact lenses and the inevitable rollout of AI features, can wearable tech revitalise a stagnating tech consumer market?
Beyond the Valley.
This week we are joined by a very special guest, so before Arjun chimes in with something, I'll introduce our special guest. He is Chief Analyst at CCS Insight, a research company that, in their words, focuses on the connected world and the future of technology. He has 25 years' experience in the mobile sector, and in 2021 he was ranked as one of the top 5 tech analysts in the US and Europe by Apollo Research. Ben Wood, thank you for joining Beyond the Valley.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
I've also read that and before the podcast started, you did hand me a sticker about the Mobile Museum. You are the founder and co-creator of the Mobile Phone Museum, a non-profit museum. I'll just be clear on that. Tell us, how did that start and when did it start?
Well, I think this shows my love and kind of how much technology and mobile technology has been part of my life. I mean, you said 25 years. I'm embarrassed to say it's now 30 years. I've hit that landmark
Need
this
to
year.
Update that bio.
The bio. That's on me. You picked the right bio. I stumbled into the tech industry in the mid-1990s. That was a point where mobile phones were just things that you held to your ear and you talked into. And I went on that journey of launching things like text messaging, connectivity to the internet. And I was surrounded by all these devices. And there was a period from the mid-1980s through to essentially the arrival of the smartphone where there was incredible device diversity in terms of design and capability. And I started picking up the odd kind of icons from the industry. And you know what it's like when you start collecting stuff. You know, if you collect fridge magnets, people will come to your house and say, hey, I've got some of those in the drawer at home. I'll bring you one next time. And slowly but surely, 10 phones became 100 phones, became 1,000 phones, became now, if you go to mobilephonemuseum.com, you'll see we've got nearly 3,000 unique devices catalogued, photographed, written up. So it's just a passion for me in terms of giving something back to the industry. And as you said, it's not for profit. We go into schools. We try and inspire kids to be the next engineers and designers of the future. But there you go. That's outside of work. My day job is looking at the market analysis, all things connected. And of course, today, what an exciting topic, wearables.
Yeah, before we get into it, just a bit of housekeeping. For our listeners, if you'd like to keep up to date on the world of tech, then the best place to start is the Beyond the Valley weekly newsletter. Packed with the best international tech stories from CNBC, you can subscribe by heading to cnbc.com/Beyond the Valley. Click on the subscribe button and it will drop in your inbox every Friday. And if you want to contact Arjun and I or have a question about a past episode, then email us at beyondthevalley@cnbc.com. Before we get back to our main story, we play Stat of the Week, which I know you're now aware of. Arjun, do you want to give us the stat?
No, not right now.
Oh,
actually.
right. Okay.
Yeah. Firstly, I've got 2 things to say.
Wow, curveball.
Yeah, curveball. I know you thought I was going to come out with the first thing. How come I never get such a grand intro like you just gave to Ben? Secondly, I remember working on an article a little while ago, looking at, I think it would have been old phones, and Ben was incredibly helpful. I'd be like, do you have this one? Yes. Do you have this one? Yes. And you'd send me a few pictures, so that was quite amazing, actually. So that's
on the old phones, I know we're going to get into it, but do you get sort of film crews, TV programs coming to you and be like, do you have a phone that we can use because we've got like this sort of old series or film that we need?
We haven't had that yet. I do keep a close eye on TV and film, and I'm always super excited. So, for example, Apple's For All Mankind was celebrating the trip to the moon and those sorts of things, and they had some iconic devices like the IBM Simon, one of the first ever smartphones, and it was an exciting moment. There are companies that do lease them out. Maybe that's a new revenue stream for the charity in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, not non-profit still, but generating that income is good. Okay, back to Stat of the Week.
Now I'll give you stat.
Okay, fine.
33.53 trillion Korean won. Who knows, the currency might give it away. But yeah, let's see. Anyways, we'll get to it at the end of the show.
Okay, brilliant. Ben, let's start, as you very beautifully introed into the subject at hand, wearables and specifically the Galaxy Ring. Tell us about this ring. For our listeners, should we be excited?
Well, I think there's a reason to get excited about the intersection of health and tech, generally speaking. You know, as a society, we have an imperative that we need to try and make everybody more aware of their own personal health, and we want to find ways to track that. And we've been given a number of tools to do that. And, you know, historically, there's some very basic things like step counters. You could have almost like a clockwork step counter back in the day. But that's evolved. It's moved into the smartwatch, which has become the kind of powerhouse of devices. You know, there'll be 250 million smartwatches sold next year. That's an incredible kind of number. And then, you know, you look at miniaturizing that technology and trying to have consistent data on people's personal performance, and the Ring's a great way to do it. It's small, it's got good battery life, it's a very commonly accepted way of wearing something. You know, it's less intrusive than, say, a pair of smart glasses that can be a bit of a kind of lightning conductor for privacy concerns and those sorts of things. It's easy to sleep in, and gaining metrics around your health when you're asleep is a great place to do it. So there's a lot to like about it, but I don't want to overhype it. This is a niche opportunity right now. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of units for Samsung potentially with the remainder of this year, not millions or tens of millions.
Well, it's an incredible, I guess, piece of technology because it's packed with sensors. It's so light. It's got a battery life the company claims for up to 7 days as well. And so it's useful in that respect because it's got the technology inside it to be able to track the things you want, but also the battery life that goes with it. Just tell us a bit about, I guess, the engineering side of this and bringing such a product to market. It's not the first company to do so. I know you've spoken about companies like Aura before, but it's clearly got the Samsung brand with it and that big ecosystem and marketing push behind it as well.
So absolutely. So for the benefit of the listeners, the first thing to note is that this is not new. There's a company, Aura, you've mentioned, which came out of Finland. They've been going for, I think, about 12 years. They launched their first Ring 9 years ago. They're on their third generation of Ring. They've sold a cumulative total of over 2.5 million to date. So they are the kind of, you know, genesis of the smart ring to some extent. But of course, you cannot underestimate a company, a massive consumer electronics business like Samsung coming into the space. The oxygen that will give it is phenomenal. It's a fantastic day for Aura, you know, a small company who could never have dreamed of getting this kind of visibility amongst consumers. In terms of the technology, what you're doing is taking the sensor array, which if you have a smartwatch, from Apple or Samsung or whoever, Garmin, if you look at the back of that watch, you will see there are sensors in that watch which are looking at things like your pulse, your blood. Your blood flow and measuring all sorts of things, body temperature. There's a whole array of things in that sensor. And what Samsung have managed to do, and Aura and others have managed to do, is just miniaturize that technology. And within the inside of the ring, there's a little array of these tiny little sensors that sit on the inside of your finger and are able to make those measurements. And there's some very logical reasons to use a ring because of the fact that the skin on the inside of your finger is relatively thin. There's not going to be any hair there. It's not going to be any tan or anything else like that. It's kind of pretty much directly connected to your heart down your arm, so it's a good place to do it. And I think that overall, as I said before, a very commonly accepted place to wear something.
Just when it comes to the health tech side of things, there has been some concerns that we maybe look at these things too much and that, over analysing how our sleep has been, and you may wake up and feel great, and then you're told that actually you had a really bad night's sleep and it was really disrupted. As someone who uses and wears these things and clearly is a supporter of more health tech or being aware of our health, is that a concern?
Well, the phenomenon you're describing is what's known as the worried well, which is typically, people who do obsess over this stuff. And I always caution people, anyone, particularly looking at sleep, I think you're right, be very, very careful, because once you start kind of obsessing about your sleep, that can be a bad thing. But, make no mistake, sleep is as important as exercise. Anything you look at around sleep it's an absolutely critical part of your overall health. There's a lovely anecdote around this, that the Guinness Book of World Records removed the kind of challenge of staying awake from the book because several people died trying to do that challenge. You have to sleep. I used to have an old adage when I was kind of young and feckless that I would kind of say, my expression in life was you can sleep when you die, but I quickly figured out that if you don't sleep, you will die. You can obsess. People do. It's a real problem for the health profession as well. There is this group of people who will be constantly looking at these stats and running in to see their doctor and say, oh, I don't know about this, I don't know about that. But on balance, from my perspective, it is super, super positive if anybody is taking an interest in their health. And, the overall balance that we're starting to see, particularly from the smart rings, where they're not necessarily expecting you to be an expert on all these different metrics, but they're mashing them up together. And on the Aura ring, you get something known as a readiness score. On the Samsung ring, you get an energy score. They're actually giving you a single metric that you can look at, and then pointers, maybe little pointers. You should have gone to bed a little bit earlier. You could do with doing a little bit more exercise, being a bit more active. Don't sit so much. All of those things will help your overall health.
And I think there's a couple of things to pick out of what you've said there that links to, I think, what Samsung's saying. If our listeners haven't looked at the Galaxy Ring, you can read all about it on CNBC.com and elsewhere. But one of the things Samsung said was, look, the Ring is one product, but we've got the watch, we've got the smartphone, and when you link all three together, we feel that we can give you more powerful metrics, more powerful understanding of your health as well. So that's one part. And then the second part is that Galaxy AI, Samsung's term for their suite of AI products, is going to link this all together. And it's all going to be about the fact that AI can analyze this data and not just tell you what's happening, but as you mentioned, do things like perhaps give you tips. And this is, what I'm hearing, what you're hearing as well from Samsung executives when they're talking about the whole health sort of landscape at this point. So when you sort of look at all of that, how detailed are we going to get, do you think, when it comes to the health information we're going to glean, the way that the smartphone becomes a personal coach? Is that the goal?
There's a lot to break down in what you've just said. So let's start. I'll try and chunk it down and go into that. Firstly, this idea, this concept that Samsung love of this ecosystem of products. You've got your ring, you've got your watch, you've got your phone. Personally, if at the most basic level, you don't need all of those things necessarily. If you've got a ring, you don't necessarily need a watch. But if you've got them both, the watch can present stuff to you, in a different way. It effectively takes over from the ring. So the ring gets longer battery life because the watch is doing some of the legwork. You need the phone because the phone is basically what connects to the ring. For example, the ring is a very basic device. It's just a piece of titanium which has got baked into it some sensors, a battery, and a little bit of RF to send a Bluetooth message to say, here's the data. It drops onto the phone. The phone absorbs that data. It can do some calculations and some interpretation on the phone. It could even go up to the cloud and actually do, further computation. So that's how these things link together. But make no mistake, there is a commercial driver for Samsung here. In the same way that if someone's got an iPhone and an Apple Watch, they probably ain't ever going to leave to go to another ecosystem. If you get into the Samsung ecosystem and you've got the phone, but then you get a watch or you get a ring or whatever, you are more invested in the ecosystem. In terms of what we do with all of this data, AI is a very powerful mechanism of easily taking that data and crunching it all together and being able to give you, some of those indicators or pointers that you talked about. And I think that's a very valuable place that we're at right now. But on the macro scale, and if you think about my comments earlier in terms of the societal imperative to find a way to improve health and particularly do a lot more predictive and preventative health. It's no good waiting till something happens. I'll give you an anecdote on that in a moment. But we can use this data to start doing that. And we've seen some incredible studies, crowdsourcing data, anonymized data from wearable devices. Apple, for example, have been very passionate about this with Apple Watch and being able, medical science, being able to do research and look at huge data sets that they could never do before. So that's very exciting. The anecdote on predictive and preventative health, this is an extreme example, but it goes down well when I'm talking about these things. I always say that I'd much rather live in a world where I'm walking down the street and an ambulance pulls up next to me and says, you'd better get in, versus the world that I have a heart attack on a dirty London sidewalk and I'm lying there with some kind of, young person live streaming it out, waiting 2.5 hours for an ambulance, and I'm progressively getting worse. Now, that's not the real scenario. The real scenario is you would hear from your GP or from your doctor and say, you know what, we're seeing some things we're a little bit concerned about. And I see a world where eventually we might even have like a digital twin in the cloud, which is looking at us. It knows all about us, height, weight, activity and everything else, and may pick up some markers that could say, well, maybe you need a bit of help on your diet. Maybe you need some help medically. Maybe there's some kind of intervention that needs to happen. And if you look at the pressure on the health services around the world, something has to happen. Hospitals are full. We're running out of money.
You've brought in the ring today, and before we started the recording, you were talking through kind of the various bits that you would have to receive to then get measured up. Talk us through the kind of what you would get if you were to buy a Galaxy Ring.
So the journey, and this applies to all rings, so we won't, it's Samsung and others, there's some complexity associated with rings because of the fact that it's not like a watch where you just put it on and the strap can be adjusted to the size of your wrist. Some smartwatches come with a large strap and a small strap. A finger is a very specific measurement. So the journey starts for anybody buying a smart ring to actually have to get their fingers sized. So you need a sizing kit. And typically what we've seen from all of the smart ring manufacturers, and we've talked about Samsung, we've talked about Aura, there's other ones like Circular and Ultrahuman, and you just go online, you'll find plenty of smart rings. Typically there's up to 9 different sizes. So as a consumer, you may have to send off for a sizing kit. Often what will happen is you'll get a rebate on that. So you can purchase that through Amazon or another retailer. They'll send you the sizing kit. You choose your size. And then once you've done that, you'll get your $10 or whatever it was taken off the cost of the ring.
So would you send the kit back? Or you get to keep the kit?
Different manufacturers have different approaches to that.
Can I try one of the?
Absolutely, you've got a whole set.
And it's not great for audio only, but I thought why not? You carry on talking.
So you can size up. So you've got a selection of rings there, but let's think about the complexity here. So firstly, as a consumer, you've got to get sized up. Now, some of the ring manufacturers are working with retail partners, or are working with Best Buy in the US. Samsung, for example, they're partnering with numerous retailers here in the UK, for example. So you'll be able to go into a store and size up. But the other thing with sizing is your fingers change through different times of the day. If your fingers get hot, they expand,
it's actually.
Right?
I was just getting a little bit worried there that this was going to get stuck on. No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Do they say the index finger's best?
The interesting thing with the Samsung watch is index finger is good because of the fact that they actually have gestures built into the ring.
Right.
So you can actually tap your thumb and finger together. And I've been using it to take selfies on my phone, for example.
Oh, I completely forgot about that. That was one of the things they made quite big. The gesture control.
Yeah.
With both the watch and the ring. So what is it? If you pinch or pinch your sort of index finger and thumb together, you can control
a tap of the index finger and thumb. So anyone who's been tracking what Apple have been doing with the Vision Pro, for example, very similar user interface on the Apple Watch. Again, hopeless for people listening, but it's possible to scroll through an Apple Watch with a simple tap. And we're starting to see gesture-based user interfaces, and we could do a whole other podcast on that another time because that is going to be something that's going to be huge in the future. But so ideally, you will put it onto your kind of index finger and thumb. I'm struggling a bit because I've got such large hands I can't actually get one of Samsung's rings on my index finger, so I'm having to do a little bit more of a stretch for my tap. But you've got the sizing. That will depend on time of day. Some ring manufacturers suggest that you take one of these plastic dummy rings and you wear it for 24 hours to see what's comfortable, because fit's very important for the accuracy of the data that you're going to get. But let's just think about this in terms of purchase journey. So you've got 9 different sizes of ring. In the case of Samsung, you've got 3 colors. So you've got 27 different SKUs of this device. Then you need the charging base, which it comes with. And of course, one charger is not going to work for all these different sizes. So you've got to have different sizes of charging for all the different rings. And you start to feel like, wow, this is a tough thing to do. And I think that there are going to be some very interesting lessons learned, particularly in the retailing of these devices. And it's something we're looking at. We're mystery shopping all of the different ways in which people are selling these rings.
Is the journey to purchase a kind of barrier at all, in your view, to consumers wanting to do it, knowing that they're going to have to order this kit, maybe wear it for a day, maybe that's not going to work, maybe try another size before they can even go about? Or is it the fact that if you're going to order the sizing kit, you know what you're in for, you're going to buy the ring, and so you're already sort of sold on it?
I see this category right now as kind of like tech jewelry, and it's going to be a trendy, very appealing thing. People who want this ring will find a way to do it, but it's certainly not an impulse purchase. It's not like you can just click and say, send me that, unless you happen to know your ring size. Now, should this product category start to become more pervasive, maybe people will start to take a bit more notice of their ring. You know, most people know how tall they are, what they weigh, what their waist size is. Maybe that's going to be a metric that people will start to take a little bit more note of.
And the $399 price tag was one of the things I think that sort of was quite surprising in many ways. It's priced higher than Samsung's own smartwatch, the Watch 7. Which again, you think, I mean, just looking at the two products, right? Something that small versus a whole watch, you'd think, well, that's a bit odd. But it's a premium product, obviously. Is the price a reflection of the intensity or the sort of technology that and R&D Samsung have had to do to bring this to market? Or is it more just reflected of the fact that Samsung's saying this is a premium product and we want it to be as such?
In all honesty, it's probably a bit of both. And the cost of this product goes way beyond the physical device itself. You know, we've alluded to that already. This is a complex supply chain challenge that comes with cost. That said, I think Samsung is very determined to maintain this as a premium product. You can usually take prices down, but putting prices up is always tough. So start with premium positioning. It's very much in line with some of its rivals as well. The interesting thing about the Samsung device is they are not charging an ongoing subscription to crunch your data and give you access to the app. In contrast, Aura have a monthly subscription that you have to pay. So they would say that's a differentiator for them. But these devices do not cost hundreds of dollars to make. And there are... you can go onto a big online retailer and you can find smart rings which do some of these things for, $20-30. So right now it's a premium product. I think that's the right approach for Samsung. I don't think they have unrealistic expectations for volumes on this. They see it as a niche additive product which plays to that kind of ecosystem of products and plays to this focus on health, which they're chasing, Apple are chasing, other manufacturers are chasing.
Well, let's talk about that then. Is this as much to do with staying, level with their rivals or keeping ahead of their rivals? How much is it about that as much as it is to grow the larger ecosystem with smartphones and integrate their other products?
It's another string to Samsung's bow. Ultimately, they're already in the smartwatch space, which has emerged to be very health centric. Let's not forget when Apple Watch was launched, it was a fashion product. Angela Andress was in there, come from Burberry. You could go in and you could buy your 18 karat gold watch. It was very much a kind of boutique experience. You'd match it with the bands, but that hit a kind of brick wall. They pivoted and they moved towards health, and they found that was a good place to do it. One of the other things, though, that I'm very encouraged about with regards to smart rings is the fact that there seems to be significantly more focus on women's health. And that's something which has been terribly overlooked and neglected in the wearable space. And when you look at these rings, some of the things that they're looking at are things like cycle tracking, core body temperature, sleep, which is hugely important. If you're a menopausal woman, that's a massively important area and a real challenge for you. And I think that that approach to these and the form factor, not some great big macho chunky smartwatch, but actually something that you can discreetly wear, good battery life, you can wear in bed, I think is an encouraging area. So from that perspective, I would expect to see Samsung maybe dialing that up a little bit. But I think, overall it's just part of them saying, we want a nice portfolio of products that will encourage people to take a look at Samsung.
Apple's really first in a lot of things, but are you surprised they've not entered this category as of yet, or even we've not heard any kind of rumors about it as of this, given, I think, their focus on health, and given also the fact that Apple is still seen in many parts of the world as quite a fashionable brand, and you'd feel like if there was some sort of Apple ring, it'd do pretty good volumes.
They've got to be looking at it. I mean, in the end of the day, to me, it feels like a very good fit. Tim Cook has made it very clear that personally he's very interested in health. He's evangelized the kind of positive aspects of Apple Watch. We've seen the Dear Tim letters, and Apple Watch saved my life, and that's real. My mother had some kind of heart moment, and her watch let her know something was going on. She ended up in hospital. It wasn't anything too serious, but one of the great things was she had a load of data that when she went back to the doctor a few weeks later, and they kind of go, well, strap on an ECG, you look fine. She goes, well, I'm clearly not. Look at this data. This is real. That intersection with Apple is a very much design first company. I think there could be a certain amount of kind of cult kind of following of an Apple ring. I think they design it nicely. It could fit well, but then let's look at the raw numbers. The numbers aren't that big right now. But the one thing Apple have as well, given this complex purchase journey, is they have a phenomenal retail network, and they're not afraid to do that kind of concierge selling, whether it was watch historically, Vision Pro now, where you go in and you have your fitting and everything else. I could see some synergies for Ring for them, but let's wait and see. Maybe it's a product they've managed to keep secret from Mark Gurman.
Yeah. Well, when they recently launched the Vision Pro here in the UK, as you alluded to there at the store, it was that sort of experience where each person who'd booked a demo had an Apple employee to escort them to a chair to do this sort of one-on-one demo. You can imagine an Apple store with this sort of jewelry corner, and it's just like some high-end jeweler with all the rings laid out, and someone wearing the white gloves to pull out the ring and put it on a little tray and all of that. I feel like it'd be that
diamond encrusted engagement rings, but with the tech inside.
Who knows?
I don't know.
I mean,
I think that I always laugh about that. It's like what smartwatches, right? So you could spend, they used to do the very blingy smartwatches, but the problem with it, it's not your Philippe Patek, Patek Philippe, whatever it is. You buy it for your grandson. Unfortunately, technology decays. So I don't think smart rings, diamond encrusted smart rings, apart from maybe some eccentric music stars or something might decide to pimp them up. But no, I think you're right though, Arjun. It does fit well with Apple, but cost of sale is immense. You're talking about something like Vision Pro, a $3,500 device. That's a big high ticket item. Something that's a few $100. But you could do that. They've got the infrastructure to do the sizing, and ultimately then people would figure it out. But exciting. As I say, I go back to the fact that it's exciting to see this intersection of health and technology, and the fact that people are starting to care. The only thing I do worry about is a lot of the people that I see wearing these kind of technologies, and I think Garmin watches are the best example of this. It's usually someone who's got a Garmin watch is running or whatever. The people who've got the technology, sometimes you wonder if they need it the least. They're already fit, they're already committed to their personal health, and I think we have to now. And I think Apple Watch to some extent has succeeded in that area where you see it, all sorts of different consumers. You sit on the train, you travel around, you see people, all shapes and sizes wearing watches. That's positive. If the Ring can go in that direction as well, that'd be good. They might need to get some slightly bigger sizes.
I remember when smartwatches sort of first hit the market, really, and I remember trying a few of them in the first 2-3 years, and I wasn't really convinced about them because the capabilities were still limited and they didn't really add a lot of value. In all honesty, I haven't sort of gone back to them yet, but the capabilities have advanced so much. And I think looking at the way the health apps, etc., have sort of come on a lot, and the capabilities now, there's certainly so many big features and good ways to use them, I think, and people are sort of learning how to do that. For Samsung, with the Ring, with the watch, with this ecosystem play, with their Galaxy AI push as well, what does that ultimately mean for Samsung's business? Because it's in all intents and purposes, Samsung Electronics, when you look at it, if you break down the sort of revenues, they make revenues from selling hardware, some mobile phones and watches, etc. Networking equipment is a small part of that. Chips, memory chips, many listeners may not even know, is and has been for a long part the biggest profit driver of the company, not the mobile phones. And so when you look at Samsung's business around mobile, it's been around hardware. The software side of the equation has been missing for such a long time. Whereas you look at Apple, obviously it owns the hardware, it owns iOS, it owns the services around that. It makes billions of dollars off services. Samsung hasn't been able to replicate that, of course, because it relies on Android. But now, if they're saying, well, we think we can have a real good health offering, we think with some of these AI features, early stages, but we've seen some of the translator interpreter tools and various other things. Do you think Samsung's thinking, it's a question I've put to executives who have given me answers like, we're looking at various things, but we just don't know how we're going to monetize AI yet. But do you think Samsung is seriously looking at ways to monetize this via subscriptions or other kind of service business model at this point?
Absolutely, Samsung will be looking at these line of service and saying, how can we monetize it? Would they be able to do that? That's a far more challenging question. And of course, they'll be looking with envy at Apple, who have managed to monetize this service set. I always joke, the iPhone is the gift that keeps on giving. It doesn't matter whether it's a second-hand, third-hand one. You're probably paying Apple something. If you download an app and you buy an app, you're paying Apple some money. If you're using Apple Pay, you're paying Apple some money. If you're using iCloud, you're paying Apple some money. So there's lots of different facets to this. Health could be an interesting one for Samsung. They may reach a point where there's some premium elements that you could add to health, which could involve, some training programs, some more detailed data. We saw Fitbit, for example, now owned by Google, but going in that direction with their premium service. But ultimately, the original premise of what you were talking about, smart rings are not going to move the needle on Apple's balance sheet. Ultimately, smartphones will. And if you've got things that will turn people's heads to say, I'm going to get a new smartphone and, Samsung, they've got that ring thing. I'm quite interested in that. Or you've got one and it means it locks you more into the Samsung ecosystem. Well, that's a win for Samsung.
And the foldables?
Foldables are interesting. So foldables, here I am. I've got one of the latest foldables with me today. I've got a whole array. I've got a bag full of foldables next to me. These are a very interesting category. Now, if we go back to my passion outside of my day job for mobile phones, I'm excited about foldables because it's bringing some design diversity back into the smartphone market, and that's a pointer as to why I think Samsung are doing this. It's one of the albeit a relatively small market, 20 million units this year, 35 next year. It's a rounding error versus the 1.2, 1.4 billion cell phones that will be sold this year. Ultimately, foldables are an opportunity for Samsung to have a very differentiated offering. They do appeal to a certain part of the marketplace, but they haven't really lived up to the massive expectations there were back in 2019 when we saw the first one arrive.
People still talk about sort of the crease, which has got a lot better, but the sort of creases in the fold.
There's some interesting. There's all sorts of facets to foldables. So the challenge is not just firstly you've got the device, and there were some teething problems in the early days where there was a high failure rate, and so that kind of scared consumers. Now we've got to a point where the devices are much more robust, but people are still worried about, is it going to break? People are still worried about, why do I actually need it? I think. The flip form factor has been the most popular by volume so far, but the folding form factor, which essentially gives you a traditional smartphone and then you open it out and you've got a mini tablet, is becoming more appealing as the engineering keeps going down that curve and they get thinner and lighter and more robust. So those are all good, but a kind of hidden cost associated with foldables is their residual value. We're now living in a world where a lot of smartphone purchase is driven by the fact that people are able to trade in their devices and get some money towards their next phone. Foldables, unfortunately, are not holding their value in the same way that the traditional kind of bar phone does.
Why is that?
Because I think ultimately people, their longevity is going to be more limited, and there is a concern about how has it been treated? Replacing screens and those sorts of elements on these devices is extremely expensive.
I was looking back 7 years ago when I was in at MWC, and we made a video about the kind of all the smart tech, the new tech that was being released, and we had wireless earbuds, which amazing. And then there was also a payment ring amongst other things. So obviously with the wireless earbuds, hugely mainstream now. Everyone's using it. Payment rings less so. In your opinion, these items that we're talking about, the smart rings, the foldable phones, in a few years' time, where do you see these ending up? Do you think that they will be something that will go, can't believe that 2 years ago no one wore a smart ring?
Well, it's interesting you bring up payment rings, because that's where my kind of smart ring journey started back in, 2017, something like that.
Yeah, so it was 2017.
And I was using a payment ring, and I love, because as someone who just has a great affinity to technology, it was like a magic trick. You could go into a bar and you just wave your hand in front of the payment machine and it would pay. And, people would, like the bar staff, hey, look at this guy, wow. But, there's a lot of debate at the moment about getting payment into these new smart rings, but there's some engineering reasons why that's very, very difficult. Payment rings were typically ceramic because you've got a lot of RF, radio frequency transmission that needs to go in there for the kind of reader of the card. And I went through tons of payment rings because I kept breaking them because if you rings
banging
take
them
a
against
beating.
the card reader.
Sadly not, but no, actually it was more like clapping my hands and hitting it against my wedding ring or those sorts of things. But they're very fragile. These smart rings that we're using now, the health-centric ones, are made of titanium. They're super, super strong, but they don't lend themselves to having radio technology in them. Furthermore, the more technology you put into them, the bigger they get, the bigger battery you need. That's the payment ring story. In terms of this, will we look back in 5 years and go, wow, I can't believe, people weren't wearing smart rings 5 years ago? I don't think it's going to be as pervasive as that, but I can see a certain proportion of the population embracing the smart ring and actually rejecting the smartwatch. Because the smartwatch, if we think about this kind of societal desire to maybe digital detox a little bit, take some of those distractions out of your life, the smartwatch is a really bad example of that. If you are enabling things like alerts on your smartwatch, it's incredibly distracting. A ring could be a way to get those health metrics without those distractions. And that might be one way in which you see these manufacturers pushing the technology.
As we come towards the end of the episode, Ben, what helps make smart rings go a bit more mainstream? Because the capabilities of the current Samsung Galaxy Ring are, as you said earlier, which was effectively taking what's in the smartwatch and miniaturizing it into a more fashionable, perhaps more comfortable form, one that can be worn 24 hours a day. There's talk of payments, but there's other talk in terms of the health aspect, that there's certain metrics or tracking features that these tech companies see as the holy grail. One of those is things like non-invasive glucose monitoring, which would be a huge breakthrough if it was possible on either a smartwatch or a ring as well. Is the key for these to really grow in scale and hit the mainstream about the capabilities more than anything?
I think there's various milestones. So the first thing will be, number one, Samsung, one of the largest consumer electronics companies on the planet, has decided to launch a smart ring, and they'll put some significant marketing investment behind that. That will take the smart ring from some sort of geeky tech health enthusiast segment that it's been to date, 3-4 million units over 10 years, to the mainstream. A lot more people will learn about this category. The next thing that could really, really kickstart the category would be if Apple made one, and that just is the case with any kind of technology. Who knows? We've had that discussion. In terms of the broader adoption of health-related tech, you're absolutely right that the holy grail is two things: non-invasive blood sugar measurement or glucose measurement, and the other thing is blood pressure. Neither of which has been cracked on the smartwatch right now. There's some rudimentary blood pressure stuff, but it's not accurate. It's not something you could use reliably. If those things happened, if Apple could get some kind of sensor into an Apple Watch which had some kind of ability to look at glucose and assess whether you were pre-diabetic, that could be a societal game changer, in the same way that an Apple Watch can tell you if you've got atrial fibrillation and you've got some kind of heart, you'll get warned on it. I think if people started getting warnings on their watches that they were pre-diabetic, it might have a societal impact. So I'm excited about that. Will people go out and buy products for that basis? Not really. I think people are generally pretty lazy. The final aspect of it is insurance companies and governments. As I said right at the beginning, health services are overwhelmed. The funding's just not there. It could well be that some of this predictive and preventative health means that you see national governments deploying wearables as a means to try and encourage people to take more interest in their health. And insurance companies may do the same. That comes with challenges, of course, but we've already seen insurance companies, aligning with wearables and taking wearables data and, saying to people, if you get a certain level of activity, we'll look at whether we'll reduce your premium.
Fantastic stuff. Before we finish, we've obviously got to do Stat of the Week.
Yeah, which I'll repeat, 33.53 trillion Korean won.
Can you give us a conversion rate?
Yeah, that's $24.3 billion.
And I'm assuming this is the Samsung Q2 kind of earnings or Samsung's market cap
it's
or something like that.
It could be
Ben,
sort of literally anything.
Is that one?
But you can go first. What's your official guess?
Well, that would be my guess is that's something to do. We saw Samsung pre-announcing where they thought their earnings were going to be. I think it was up something like 1,500% or something incredible year on year. The Korean won was the tip to it. It's a big number. I should know the exact number, but that's what I'm going for.
So Samsung Q2 guidance. Tom?
I'm going really careful. The amount of money that Samsung have put into developing their smartphone.
That might not be far off. So
they're going to need to sell a lot.
100%.
You are nowhere near, Tom. I'll say that. Ben is closer, but still not correct. Do you want a second round of guesses?
I don't know.
Final round of guesses.
Revenue from their smartphone business, something like that. I don't know. Or it could be the revenue from something like the memory business. You alluded to that. Where's the big powerhouse for Samsung's earnings?
And Tom, final guess from you?
The amount of money that they've spent on developing smartphones since day one.
Okay, Tom, you're just completely on the wrong course here. Ben basically got it.
Yeah, well, I thought,
it was smartphones, mobile and network business revenue in the first quarter because they've not announced their full Q2 results yet. So that was, and that's been very strong because of the S24 range they launched in January, which has done very, very well in the high-end segment of the market. And interestingly, because the memory chip market has been quite bad over the last sort of year or so, Samsung's memory business is done pretty bad, and the mobile units eclipsed it more recently. But we are seeing sort of green shoots of recovery in the memory market, which is why, as you alluded to, that Q2 guidance they gave was so strong as well.
Yeah, it's a very cyclical market.
But
there you go. And the S24, very much anchored on this AI story, which we talked about earlier.
Brilliant stuff. Thanks so much, Ben, for joining us on Beyond the Valley. Before we go, please follow and subscribe to the show, and you can rate us. Thank you, Ben.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Arjun.
Thank you, Tom.
We'll be back next week for another episode of Beyond the Valley. Goodbye.
Beyond the Valley.